What is happening, everybody? All right, so a little late night Mopar chat. Yours truly. Hope everything's going well for you on this Sunday evening. Spent the majority of my day being sick. Feeling a bit better now, so figured I'd hang out with you guys, chat it up a little bit, kind of an impromptu late night edition. So, hang on, let me get provisions over here, courtesy of Taco Bell. That's what you call some fine dining. So, a lot of folks have been asking me what the plans are going to be for the new Hellcat. And a lot of the things that I want to do with that car are going to focus around me being a little bit more pragmatic with my approach. What I mean by that is it's really not going to be a full on, just a, max effort type of a thing. In fact, I'm going to keep it fairly stock. And the main reason for that is that I'm okay playing in the shallow end, so to speak. And what I mean by that is, I've had the opportunity to be around a ton of very fast cars. Hey, what's up, y'all? Hang on. Santos, what's up, man? Michael Corleone, what's up, my man? Thank you very much. Hi, Triple Threat. So, main thing I'm going to do with that car is, basically kind of use it for some development. Looking to work with HP Tuners and Alex Pites over at Pites Performance to perfect the flex fuel tuning capabilities for the Mopars. And there are a lot of folks that are doing some good things with the flex fuel. The problem is there's some limitations. And those limitations, Triple Threat, hey, what's up, man? The limitations are in how that system actually works. So one of the things I wanted to chat with you guys about was specifically that flex fuel and how the flex fuel technology can work. And it's not quite as simple as you might think. In fact, with the Mopars, there's quite a few things that can help to complicate things along the way. So, getting to it. When we're talking about flex fuel, the ways that the computer can monitor or check ethanol content is by direct measurement of the ethanol content, the way that a GM sensor can do. Unfortunately, you can't use that with HP Tuners and a Mopar ECU because there's no provision for it. It would need a custom operating system with basically a 5-volt setup to where it would work that way. The way that the Demon measures it is through basically it's knock. It's when it sees a certain amount of knock, it will infer that there is a 93 octane tune and you run the 93 octane. If it doesn't see that knock, then it's obviously got race gas in it and it will run with that timing profile as well as the fueling. So hang on, let me get through some of these. Hang on. Anyway, the long and short of it is it's tough because if you numb the knock sensor sensitivity, which a lot of guys do because Mopars have a lot of false knock, then that can screw up how the knock sensors would pick up on the fact or not fact that you've got a lower grade gasoline in it. You can cause it to blow the car up. real sketchy, especially if you're running long tube headers and you have dropped that knock sensor sensitivity or raise the knock sensor sensitivity. It'll never get into the point where it will know that it has a lower octane fuel. That's one of the reasons behind it. So, excuse me, at any rate, kind of going to use the car more for development than anything else of that system. But aside from that, I'm just going to keep putting the drag pack on it, taking it to the drag strip, try to get a 1050 out of it. It's going to be kind of a tough thing to do running a full interior, but that car is a riot to drive, and so I'm just going to leave it like that. So looks like we already got some questions. Hang on just a second. Let's see what we got. Some phonics. What's going on, man? How's it going? Tyler. Is that Gento? It looks like he's asking, would I like to drive and compare? Oh, man, hang on. His 650 horsepower GT500 to the Hellcat. Actually, I've driven quite a few GT500s that were 600, 700 to the wheels. It's difficult to compare the two cars. It really is, because the GT500 it's really good. I mean, my car is an automatic. GT500 is obviously going to have the 6-speed. Every single one of the GT500s I've ever driven, I've fallen in love with. So I don't know. It's one of those things where I don't know if you'd ever get your car back. To this day, I'm still kicking myself in the ass for not buying a GT500. So I can tell you it would fare favorably, without a doubt, mainly because my experience with that car has been nothing but good. I have never driven a GT500 that I didn't like, and there are a few that I did fall in love with. So yeah, but yeah, anytime. Bring it by the drag strip, man. Let's get that thing. Let's get some ETs going with that. Phoenix 98, what's happening? How you doing? Let's see. Hetty, I'm not even going to try this one. I'm just going to leave it at Heidi, my friend. I love the name, though. I love unique names. That's so cool. I'm so boring with my name, Brian. Everybody's named Brian. Anyway, he's asking, what is a proper RPM for a trans tune? Talking about the 392 to shift at. It's going to depend on a couple of things. You got to tell me what mods are done to the car. But if we're talking ported intake, maybe a larger throttle body, and still running the stock cats or, long tube headers, I don't really like going too far away from stock. I have tried higher shift points with my 392 in the past, and man, the car didn't like it at all. You could actually feel the car nose over at about 6,300 RPM. They just don't like much more RPM than that. Most of the cars will kind of flatline and then dip down a little bit in terms of power. And the last thing you want to do is be running the car past that point. You don't want to be running it past peak power, because if you run it past peak power and your power level and your power on a graph, so to speak, flatlines, all you're doing is hemorrhaging torque after that. And you're not really accelerating the way that you should be. You need to reach peak horsepower and then shift. And that'll put you back into a fat portion of the torque curve, which you're going to need because the car is heavy. Now, that's not to say that you've got some overrun in there. If you're running it on a road course or whatnot, you want to have a little bit of overrun just to get you to the next corner. But aside from that, if you're drag racing or on the street, no sense in really wicking that thing all the way out. So LSX, isn't it past your bedtime? Yes, as a matter of fact, it is past my bedtime, but I couldn't sleep. So here we go. Past my bedtime. Drink some Metamucil, aka Diet Pepsi. Let's see. Symphonics chiming in with, I asked you a few weeks ago about Chevy going away from single in-block cam engine designs. And I got the idea from Johnny Lieberman. He said that the LT5 is basically maxed out. Man, I got to tell you something. To me, if the question is, should they move away from it? My answer to that is no. The architecture is just fine the way that it sits. It's reliable, a lot more simple, which means it's less expensive to put together, and packaging is, well, much more simple, to say the least. You don't have to plan around an engine that's another 3 to 4 inches taller and just as many inches wider on either side. So it's tough to say that it'd be a good idea. Besides, to be honest, at this stage of the game, they're a little bit late to the party if they were to go with a 4-valve setup. And the reason why I say that is, man, you talk about moving forward. Everybody wants to talk about looking forward to the future. What does the future hold for GM in terms of engine architecture? And just because the Coyote, which, keep in mind that the Coyote or the old Romeo blocks from 96, I mean, they've been doing overhead cam setups, in terms of architecture for engines for a very long time, and their platforms are designed around it. I don't see Chevrolet making any huge sweeping changes, but you never know. I just, they've got it figured out so well. That is such a reliable, such a strong and durable package that I just think moving away from it would be bad. Plus, the money that they would have to put into it with development and testing and durability and the whole bit is just going to be tough. Getting a new engine certified by the EPA is a feat in and of itself. So Mr. Scowface says they need to put the red eye engine in the Durango. They need to put that engine in everything. Let's see. TU asks, will I be at the Kevin and David Van Voris event in January, February? Probably not. With my schedule being what it's been lately, I can only tell you that I am putting together a track rental. It's going to be for probably the middle of January. That will be the only event that I'll really be able to attend this year. My schedule has been completely jacked up lately. Let's see. Dealer Ren, you have to work on that launch. Yeah, a lot of it. I need to quit launching my car like a little sissy. Let's see. What else we got? Hang on just a second. Let me scroll through these. So guys, man, come on with the names. Okay, so Cinchano 22 is asking, what can he do with the 5-speed trans and the 6.1 Charger? Tell you what, Nag 1's a good transmission. Keep in mind that transmission's been behind every hot rod Mercedes leading up to 2009. That 5-speed has been behind some of the most powerful E55 Mercedes sedans. So I don't know if there's anything you would want to necessarily do with it. I mean, there's not a re-gearing option. Obviously, internals are still going to be fairly strong. There are upgrades for that transmission. You can always go with a different converter if you've got enough cam and intake and throttle body to work with it. But in total, the Nag 1's actually a pretty stout setup. So if it's a durability mod, you can always dial it up a little bit with a performance rebuild. But for the most part, that trans is pretty stout. Let's see. Bear with me here, trying to get through some of these. Okay, it's a good question. So, Hattie Baydoun, God, man, sorry with names. God, I'm horrible with that. Is asking, so what does the trans tune do on a 392 since the stock shift point is 6,200? Is an extra 100 RPM really going to be that effective? He says he does a lot of roll racing, and I wonder what the mods would be best for that. So the trans tune for the 392s helps drivability a ton, especially with partial throttle downshifts. When you start getting into wide open throttle shifting, the trans tune itself, in terms of shift points, it's not really that you're looking for. You're looking for, what is torque management doing? That's the biggest thing. But for the most part, roll racing, probably not going to see a huge difference. Stretching that RPM out a little bit, again, isn't going to help you a whole lot. But where it will help you is partial throttle shifting and shift firmness when you are at wide open throttle. Those are the two areas that it'll help you out the most. But aside from that, I mean, trans tuning is really more a drivability. It basically peps the car up under all driving scenarios. So my main thing, though, with transmission tuning is just make sure that you leave your torque management in effect. Some tuners have a nasty habit of killing it altogether, and that can do a little bit of long-term damage to the transmission or has the potential to. HB70 is actually pretty stout behind a stock 392. So, some folks have been able to get away with it for a while, leaving that torque management completely out. But you do want to have some in there just to ease the hit on the shift. Actually helps it to shift a little bit faster too. But you can make some adjustments to that. Let's see. Oh, sorry, scrolling through here. Sorry, I got this. Hang on, having a problem here. Technical difficulties. Mr. Scowface says, I found out that the 2019 Charger Scat Packs, it sounds exactly the same as the 345 Charger Hemis from 2000 to 5750 RPM. I think the 392 has a 345 exhaust system. The older ones, I'm not really sure. I know the newer ones, the exhaust system is significantly different. 392's got a great sounding exhaust system. Probably one of the best sounding, especially with a cat delete. The Hellcats can be a little bit loud with those little glass back mufflers that they've got, but I would say that the 392's probably got the best sounding exhaust out of all of them. I've seen some guys that were running the 392 manifolds on a 5.7 were out hunting for the takeoff exhaust system. Some of the guys had gone with, you know, an aftermarket exhaust system. They were looking to get the cat pipes and the exhaust system off of those 392 cars. Sounds really good. Symphonic says, so it seems almost every Mustang YouTuber that has an 18 Mustang GT has had this ticking engine or the ticking engine issue. What are my thoughts on that? Man, every car manufacturer has their own idiosyncrasies. I mean, they, you know, the Hemis had the Hemi tick, which was either exhaust or lift or both. The LS platform isn't without its flaws, although there aren't very many. But for the new Coyote, that tick, I'm not even sure if they've truly figured out what exactly it is. Some guys have said that it was exhaust manifolds. Other guys are concerned that it's a real mild rod knock. Other guys have said that it's basically it's the follower that the cam hits as it's swinging around. There's actually a small follower that it hits. It could be that. I don't know what it is, but you know, the Coyote's just a beast of an engine in terms of what it can handle. There are some upper limits for it. There's obviously some RPM limits for it, but as far as what the tick is, I've heard every story under the sun, and I haven't heard any definitive, yes, this is what the problem is, or no, that's not the problem. Some guys have said that it goes away, then it comes back. Temperature dependent stuff. I don't know. It just seems kind of weird that it's, you know, it's one of the weirder things too, because you would think that wouldn't be a problem considering there's not that big of a difference in total, aside from a fuel system between the older Coyotes and this one, but who knows? They'll get it figured out, and it'll be one of those situations where it's probably an easy fix. I hope. At least I'm hoping that. Let's see. Ends with 22. I was thinking of starting up a YouTube for my 6.1. Is it a good idea since the 6.1 feels like a thing of the past? Man, it's always a good idea. And the 6.1 isn't a thing of the past necessarily. I mean, the 6.1's got a lot of upshot, and I don't see any reason why you shouldn't, man. I say go for it. Be proud of that 6.1. 6.1's why we are where we are today. So, yeah, no, I love the 6.1s. Post it up, man. I'll check it out. I'm sure other people would like to see it too. Let's see. There's Scalfe. I think we're still talking. Let's see. I thought Mr. Scalfe says, I thought they both had the same exhaust systems and the engine produced different sounds, but it seems as if the exhaust systems are tuned differently because the 392 sounds like 345. Well, the 345 and the 392 have distinctly different exhaust systems, namely in the manifolds. 5.7's got that log style manifold, which is really weird. I don't understand why there should be any real difference between a 345 and a 392 as far as bolting the stuff up. I don't know if it's because, I don't know, maybe the engines are running down the same line as the truck engines. I always wondered that, because the 345, no matter what, on the dyno, always puts down the same power, whether it's in a Challenger Charger or a truck. I think they're all making the same horsepower. But anyway, it's more of that's more their corporate engine, I guess. So they just get a little bit different manifold. But no, it is completely different. And the 5.7s do pick up with exhaust systems where the 392s really don't for the most part. That 5.7 always does. And a 5.7, by the way, with long tubes and a set of MagnaFlows is an amazing sounding engine. Let's see. Hitless Combo just picked up a 19.392 and 900 miles with a tick on startup. Stops after it warms up. Should I worry? I'd get that thing to the dealership like right now and have them go over it. Make sure that it's not an exhaust manifold getting loose. So what happens is exhaust manifold, if the bolt if one of the bolts is just a little bit loose, it allows just a tiny amount of gap, and then once everything warms up, it obviously metal expands and it comes together and it seals back up. That is not going to heal itself over time. So you're going to want to get that thing back to the dealership, have them tighten everything up, make sure everything's good to your satisfaction, not to the dealership satisfaction. You're the customer here. Make sure it's fixed to your satisfaction and that everything is cool. If you have the problem again, that's going to be an issue. Now, if the engine ticks and when you roll into the throttle, it goes away, and when you back off of it, it comes back, that is a lifter on its way out, or it's done. And at that point, you need to get it there immediately, because a failed lifter is not very far in your future. So, but the newer cars, honestly, don't have the same issues that the cars from 13 and 14 and some from 15. They got all that stuff figured out. There's nowhere near the amount of issues now that there were then. And even then it was, like let's say it's 0.5%, which is still a lot, but not as bad as you might think. There are plenty, by the way, of Hemis running around with 200,000, 300,000, 400,000 miles on them that never had one issue, but they're very well maintained. Hondo, hey, what's up? How you doing? Says he loves his new Ram. I bet those are awesome trucks. New Rams are nice too. Tobirama says, hey, B. Mason, I have a friend telling me the Dakota, his Dakota, the 1,000 horsepower 426 to be competitive in our area, Orlando, Ontario, Canada. Please clear that up for us. Let's see. Hang on a second. Let me try to read this here. The print on this thing is tiny. I mean, if you want, I guess if you're asking if that thing will fit in your Dakota, hey, it might. I would be only thing I would be concerned about is transmission, especially in when you're talking about an engine that's making that much power. But you put the right transmission behind it, you'll be fine. German, and who else is watching this while they're on the toilet? Yeah, probably the best place to watch this. Says he's debating on whether to get an RT or an SRT8. Get the SRT8 every time. But if you're talking about a new car versus an older car, you use the actual, you specified SRT8, which I'm thinking maybe you're looking at an older one. A new RT versus an old SRT8. I don't know. I probably still have to go with the SRT8. But there is a lot to say about that HP70 8-speed automatic. Delio responds with, my 392 ticks once it's up to operating temperature. You're talking about it ticks when it's cold. Pretty fairly common with some of them. Like I say, I wouldn't worry too much about it, but it is something to, if it ticks when it's warm and you've got a situation where you're at idle and you can hear it tick, that's going to be a problem. Also, too, a lifter that's going bad will also have a bit of a chirp to it. You may mistake it for like a pulley that's not exactly lined up right. It's another kind of a symptom of a lifter that's going bad. A tick, not so bad. A chirp, get that thing to the dealership. Let's see. Oh, Symphonics is saying, he's looking for me to settle a debate here. Is the Demon a stock car? Hang on just a second. Demon guys are always saying that a Demon loses a race, that the other car wasn't stock. But basically, the Demon is a modded car from the factory. Actually, the Demon is a factory car. It is very stock. And as a matter of fact, the Red Eye has got, it's basically a 90% Demon with a few things that the Demon doesn't have, which is a more street-oriented suspension. But aside from that, it's still got the intercooler chiller, what some people will end up calling a killer chiller from the factory, but it's not. It's a little bit different system, but it does the same thing in the same way. Demon's a stock car, and I had the privilege of being able to drive one for about 3 weeks. In fact, I kind of lived with that car on again, off again during testing and data logging. So it runs, drives, gets around town just fine. It just happens to be very well sorted out from the drag strip from the factory. In the same way that, a Corvette Z06 is very well sorted for closed circuit track racing. So just a horse of a different color, it just has a different task to perform, but it is optimized for that task. So, and I will say this, in a drag race, a Demon is very difficult to beat, not only just because it's fairly quick from the factory, but it is so sweet taking a Demon down the drag strip. It is, you can tell that they put a lot of work into getting that suspension where it needed to be. Almost as sweet as taking my Hellcat down the drag strip. Let's see. Cleaver Enterprise asks, is it best to change to a cooler thermostat in a 2018 Charger 392? It's always a good idea to switch to a cooler thermostat in your 392 for a couple of reasons. One, obviously you want to have cooler temperatures. Cooler temperatures help the car run a little bit cooler. Also, your oil cooler is integrated into your coolant system. So you can bring that oil temperature down a little bit just by putting that thermostat in the car. Now, with that being said, you will need a tune to really take advantage of that cooler thermostat. Some guys in earlier cars said that they were getting check engine lights because the car wasn't getting to a specific temperature in a specific amount of time. I've never run into that problem. I've never seen it myself, but I have heard of it. But it's just something to think about. It's not going to hurt you if you don't. It can only help you if you do put a cooler thermostat in it, though. I haven't seen a whole lot of, how do you put this? I haven't seen a whole lot of evidence saying that you'll go quicker in the quarter mile with a cooler thermostat. So if you're outright racing, you're letting the car cool off between rounds, you might not really even notice the difference. But for cruising around, yeah, you want that temperature down a little bit. Let's see. Steven Russo, any thoughts on Hellraiser Performance and their the HP70 swap out to the HP90? Don't know anything about it. I'd love to hear how they went about doing it, because that would be the best upgrade if you're deciding that you want to go with a, any power adder, especially nitrous in your 392. You're going to run into the limitations of that HP70 very quickly. So if they've got to swap over to an HP90, which is a silky smooth shifting transmission, by the way, as opposed to a built HP70, I'd be on board to learn more about that. Let's see. What else we got in here? Bear with me. Let's get to some questions here. Let's see. Is it Germa N? He's saying, hey, B Mason, hey, man. Says his friend tells him not to get a Challenger from 2012 to 2016 because of too many issues and recalls. Is he correct? No, he's not correct. In fact, I'd say that's kind of a messed up thing to say. Not a lot of recalls. Every car manufacturer's got recalls. I mean, there's recalls on pretty much every new car that's made, except for the ones that are carryovers from previous years, where they get this kind of stuff sorted out. I don't know of any recall that you should ever be worried about from, especially the 15 and 16 cars. And that's really the ones you would be probably more interested in, because, I mean, quite honestly, that's going to be the better car in terms of just outright performance. The NAG 1 cars, or the cars with the 5-speed automatics, they're fantastic cars. And the reality with those cars is that now you can get them for a substantial discount. So I wouldn't have any problems jumping all over one of those things. As a matter of fact, I'd say go for it. Pick whichever one you like, whichever one fits within your budget, and let her rip. Every time, all the time. Let's see. Quick break. What's up, my brother? Says, long time no see. It says they did put, this is stuff that, sometimes I don't pick up on. And he might be setting me straight here. They did put the active valve exhaust on the 5.7 Chargers and Challengers starting in 18. Oh, cool. Pretty sure the 5.7s did not get the 6.4 tubular manifolds. I tell you what, that is the biggest, one of the biggest fumbles for me with Mopar is not putting that manifold on the 5.7s. It's weird too, because the 5.7 is in some or several ways better optimized than the 6.4 liter in that the intake manifold, plenum volume per engine displacement is more appropriate. The runner length and size is a bit more appropriate just in terms of making power and being efficient. It comes with the same 80 millimeter throttle body that the 6.4 does. So there's that to consider. And for them to put that log manifold on it, really? I mean, I thought this was supposed to be a performance car. But that being said, the 5.7s, if you're into cars and you're a car guy, is a lot of fun because you can put headers on it and see a gain in power. You can just kind of walk into that platform knowing that there are some noticeable gains, whereas with the 6.4, that platform is fairly well optimized. There is room for improvement, but the 5.7s in some ways do take to some mods better. Some will argue that it's a better combination, but the reality is that everything you do to a 5.7 is only to get it to try to get to the level of a stock 6.4. So keep that in mind. You're not going to get that same power out of a naturally aspirated 5.7, but there's always a boost. Symphonics asks, I know you are a Mopar guy, but have you ever considered a C7 Z06 or a C6 ZR1? Yes, I have. So there was a point in time where I had really contemplated picking up a ZR1. The issue that I had with that, though, is at the time, those cars were just a little too pricey. Now, the C7 Z06, it just honestly fell outside of my budget. But if you are to compare a C7 Corvette to a C6, the C7 feels like a spaceship compared to the C6 in terms of refinement. It just seems like there is a lot more engineering prowess and investment put into that Corvette. I would probably say that on a scale of 1 to 10, the C7 Z06 in terms of sports cars is about as high on the food chain as you can get. And that includes the Viper. As much of a fan of the Viper as I am, I have to admit that it's difficult, to say the least, to even bring up the Viper, bring up the Vet without talking about how much better it is overall than the Viper. I know a lot of my Viper brethren are, throwing bricks at their computer screens if they're watching this at all, but the reality is the Vet is really that good. So if Viper ever comes out, or Dodge ever comes out, I have to do pretty damn good job on that one. Let's see. Tobirama says, the same buddy who tells me that he needs 1,000 horsepower says I should go stick for the fun factor, but I don't want to sacrifice too much speed, so I want to go auto. What do I think? Well, first of all, if you got anybody telling you that you need, hang on a second, hang on, bear with me here. Get our normal view here. Time out. Got technical difficulty. Hopefully this thing doesn't fall on the floor again. First of all, same buddy tells me I need 1,000 horsepower. Let me tell you something. If you got a buddy telling you that you need 1,000 horsepower, then I hope your buddy's going to be paying for you to get that 1,000 horsepower. No, buddy, need 1,000 horsepower. Says you should go with the stick for fun factor. Let me tell you something. If you've got 1,000 horsepower and you're running that and you're rolling through the gears yourself, there's a difference between fun and frightening. And that difference typically comes on the 3/4 shift at wide open throttle. And if you break traction on that 3/4 shift, and I've had cars that would, by the way, it quits being fun very quickly. And then you learn to modulate it, and then you do it all the time. But anyway, the point is, don't get caught up in horsepower numbers. Buy whatever you feel comfortable with, and let it ride from there. But no, you don't need to have anything that serious. Let's see. Frank Davis, Kurt at Injected Engineering has a flex fuel tune. Says he's going back to what I said earlier. How do you think they are doing it with a Mopar PCM? I don't know if they're just using HP tune or just wondering. So there are some strategies that are out there for flex fuel. The problem is that there are several different ways you can get to that flex fuel accommodation. I'm not sure how they're doing it. There are ways of, let me stop right there. There are ways to upload different operating systems into your stock PCM. In other words, you can tell your PCM that it has, it's like implanting a new organ, so to speak. You can actually input different portions of an operating system into your stock ECU. That's kind of how the initial programming was for HP tuners for the flex fuel accommodation. The problem is that there's some internal protocol that doesn't always come through. And so instead of having everything talk to each other and everything's interconnected, you'll have one piece of the puzzle that's out. Everything else will work fine. It's just that one piece that for whatever reason doesn't communicate properly. So whether they're doing it through the knock sensors, I don't know. Whether they're doing it through O2 readings, which is another way to do it, I'm not sure. But everybody's trying to find an angle. And the problem with trying to find an angle is that, I mean, this isn't boxing. You know, it's nothing like you're just going to find this one magic combination that's going to work for you every time, because each way of doing it has a counter. It's got a kryptonite to it. So if you're doing it through the knock sensors, the problem is if you desensitize the knock sensors for long tube headers, then you've immediately taken away your ability for the computer to know that it has a lower grade fuel in it, for example. If you do it through the O2s, which is really a better inferred way to do it. In other words, it's not measuring the fuel itself, it's inferring that it's got a lower grade fuel. That can potentially get weird because of the amount of adaptive swing that your fueling has. It'll adapt 25% rich, 25% lean. And you would assume that a lower grade fuel would have have the ability to have a more lean mixture at some timing value. Problem is, it doesn't always work like that. It's load based. And if you're running a very high load, then you're going to be in basically closed loop at that point, or open loop at that point. So again, it's got its own kryptonite. What I would like to see is the ability to run a GM flex fuel sensor with a basically a 5-volt voltage pickup in the ECU that you could actually read the ethanol content, and then instead of being an inferred value, it's an actual value. And on that 5-volt system, changing the digital signal to analog, and then be able to actually tell the computer what is going on with the fuel in the engine, and then have a timing table set up specifically for obviously partial throttle cold, partial throttle hot, wide open throttle cold, wide open throttle hot, and have all of those be able to talk to each other. That's the way it should be done. Problem is that the development for that operating system takes forever. and then incorporating all of the sensors and everything else into that takes a while too. So, by the way, that's a real long and convoluted way for me to say I don't have any idea what they're doing with that thing. Let's see. VTEC Eater says, I have a 2017 Scat Pack Charger with mid-muffler delete and a set of ET Street Rs. Good tire, by the way. I'm stuck in the 12s. I've been 12.037. What's my best bang for the buck? Well, let's see. You got a 2017 Scat Pack Charger, and I'm assuming it's basically stock on ET Street Rs. Are you running 18s or 17s on the back of that thing? And also check your tire pressure. Make sure you're not running too low of a tire pressure. And as far as anything else goes, you know, getting one of those cars into the 11s is not impossible. You might want to consider pulling a little bit of weight out of it. If you've got anything extra in the car, just ditch it. That includes the floor mats. But at this stage of the game, I mean, you're really looking at something like, I don't know, a tune, maybe a throttle body, but I don't know if it'll really get you there. Tune will absolutely get you there, though, in terms of outrightness, making more power. But last thing I can say to that is just work on the launch. I don't know what your 60 foots were, but you get those 60 foots down into the 1.6, low 1.7 range, you're running 11s for sure. Tobirama checking in with, I feel like FCA lied to us when they said the Demon has the most powerful V8 ever, or the Shelby 1,953 horsepower from 5.8. Oh, the Trinity from 2013. My thoughts on that? You know, the Shelby, he's talking about the Super Snakes, and I forget the actual designation of it, but that is kind of an aftermarket deal. That's Shelby doing that to a GT500 platform. Those engines were pretty much bomb-proof. They would run at 1,000 horsepower indefinitely for the most part, but it was a limited run at best. It's too bad, too, because that would have been a great platform to put in the new GT500 if Ford will ever release it. It's driving me nuts. But anyway, no, it really isn't, because Shelby is kind of an aftermarket supplier, whereas the Demon was developed and designed and engineered in-house by Dodge, which is FCA. Hottie asks, do you need a tune for NOS on a Scat Pack? Asking for a friend. Yes, you do need a tune for nitrous oxide. Do not put nitrous oxide on a 392 or a 5.7 or anything without putting a tune on it. If you choose to do this, you are walking that road at your own peril. Don't go over 75 shot if you try it. And even then, don't try it. Don't do it. Get a tune for it. And make sure you change out the plugs. Do it right. I mean, honestly, don't try to get away with something. So this brings up a really good point that blows my mind nowadays. So look, guys, the reality is that you cannot get away with the things with cars today that you used to be able to get away with back in the day. I cannot stress this enough. The cars of today, the way that they're built, they are extracting a ton of horsepower out of a given amount of cubic inch displacement. The 392 is a badass example of this. A 392 cubic inch engine making basically, albeit, you know, in stock form, 485 horsepower. What you used to do to have to get, or to try to get that kind of power out of an engine back then, you know, way back in the day, it was extremely difficult to do in terms of finances. I mean, you got to be ready to strap down some money to get close to 500 horsepower out of a 392 that was a reliable street engine. Yes, you could get more out of it. And typically when I say 392, I mean 408, because that is the generic 4-inch bore, 4-inch stroke that you would see with any, you know, old school small block stroker, small block Ford stroker, or a small block Mopar stroker setup. So Yeah, I mean, you could, and we're talking SAE numbers here, not gross numbers. So I know all about the gross horsepower ratings and all of that, but the reality is that there are plenty of engines back then that, yeah, you could take a stock engine, throw 125 shot on it and call it good. The LS is a great example of that. But something like a 392, it's not designed for that. It's designed for NA power. And it's unfortunately a very good way of going about getting NA power with the way the pistons are designed and everything else. You just can't, don't do it. Don't treat the old engines, or don't treat the new engines the same as the old engines. They were so underpowered and over-engineered for their power level that it's not even, you can't even compare the two, honestly. VTEC Eaters running his, oh yeah, the 18s, running them 305 45 18s at 24 PSI. That's actually a good PSI for those tires. I would not, for your power level, I don't think you need to go below 22 or 23. I run my 17s at 23 PSI. So far, they've dead hooked every time. So I would probably say, again, work on the launch, get that thing out of the hole as hard as you can. On your burnout, don't overheat them. Do about a 5 to 6 second burnout with about a 10-foot rollout. You should be good. Let's see. Bear with me here. Cleaver Enterprise says LMI tune, CAI 91 octane tune, and thermostat next week. Nice set of mods. Should he be looking for heads? My thoughts on stroker kits. Don't worry about the head. Stroker kit's a good idea. Don't try to take it too far. It's not even worth it. The problem that you end up running into is the farther you take it, the farther you can get away from drivability. I don't like the idea of throwing parts at a car just for the sense of throwing parts at a car. I'm a big drivability, daily driver, long distance cruise, date night kind of performance. You start getting into throwing stroker kits or big camshafts or both at a car, and you can run into two things. You can run into drivability problems. You can run into tunability problems. And what tunability means is that it works great for the most part, but then there's that one time where you go to start it and it has this weird, annoying cold start issue or a hot start issue or something along those lines because Mopar. So I would say don't get too wrapped up in that. I like stroker kits. Keep it mild though, and you'll have a whole lot more fun with it. Don't get into the rat race portion of it where you feel like you've got to have, a little bit more cam would be a little bit more fun with your stroker if you decide to do it. Symphonic says, so for an LS3 guys, now considering the LT1, how concerned should you be about the LT1? Oh, the DI gunking up thing, right? How often does it need to be cleaned? Dude, I got to tell you something, man. I've seen the intake valves on a lot of LT1s. If you stay on top of the maintenance and you stay on top of the cleaning, you'll be okay. I've seen a lot of them that have had no issues whatsoever with no maintenance done to them whatsoever. And you'll get this like grape-sized blob of gunk on that valve. It doesn't seem to be hurting anything. It's just a little bit concerning when you see it. But look, out of sight, out of mind. I would check with the dealership and see if there is a protocol for cleaning those intake valves, aside from actual manual cleaning, which means getting in there and actually, scraping the stuff off. I wouldn't worry too much about it, to be honest with you. Stay on top of the maintenance, but there's just something to the idea that you would have to do that. And by the way, there is no catch can that's going to save you from that. That is a product of just how that system works. A catch can help mitigate that, but it will not make that problem go away. Tobirama says, I thought Shelby was OEM since they don't touch anything but Ford cars. Yeah. It says at least they haven't for years. The idea back then was it was a subset, so to speak, from Ford. But my understanding is it was still treated as a specialty car, and it was treated as a specialty item. So not sure if that does encroach upon factory or OEM or anything like that. But suffice it to say, those cars were special. But it'd be interesting to find out. Let's see. Let's see. German N says, does it really make a difference on an SRT8 if you have 18-inch wheels or 22s? Yes, it does. And second, for the challengers, settle for the V6s, V8, settle the V6 versus V8 debate. Well, that's pretty easy to do. Yeah, the 22s are going to be heavier, and the tires are going to be more expensive. So there you go with that. As far as V6 versus V8, it depends on what you're doing with the car. I never would pick a V6 over a V8, at least not with that V6's architecture. Yeah, I would go V8. And if the V8 isn't in the budget, or you're wanting something that gets a little bit better fuel economy, let me squash that real quick for you. The budget portion of it, you're going to have a higher resale value with the V8 either way. So, and I would probably argue that it may not depreciate as quickly, although don't take my word on that. I would just, common sense would tell you that the V8 is going to be a more desirable car. And in terms of fuel economy, if you do a lot of in-town driving, I don't know that you're going to see a big difference between a V6 and a V8. In fact, a lot of times there's a lot less of a difference than you might think. So, I don't see a good reason to go the V6 over the V8. I can't really see it. So if somebody can make somebody can post a solid argument that, for the V6 over the V8, I'd love to hear it. I can't think of one off the top of my head. Let's see. 12 G says, long tubes versus just going catless mids on a 392. Go catless mids on the 392. Don't worry about long tubes. And I will just leave it at that. That is a discussion that I have. Hang on a second. We got something that's about to die. Time out. Got to feed it. There we go. I don't like to get too deep into the long tubes on a 392 argument, mainly because I've seen it a ton of times. I've tested it, or tested them. There's just not a lot of a gain there. And the reason for that is the lobe separation on the cam just doesn't allow that much scavenging. I will say this, though. They are better at making torque at partial throttle. And they do, and they increase torque at partial throttle and at lower RPM. For that, they're worth it, but don't buy them because somebody is selling them to you based on horsepower. Buy them for how they make the car feel under partial throttle conditions and under, just the way that it sounds, because under wide open throttle conditions, there's not a huge gain there, but they do help. Let's see. Donald Power says, "IB, hey, what's up? The Mason Hellcat. Yeah, it should be making its debut. Might be making its debut next Friday. We'll see. Still working on that." LXX Jimmy. Come on, man. You know you want to trade the Hellcat in on a V6 swinging on 22s. Hey, if it do swing, I might. Who knows? Yeah, no. No, I don't at all want to have, no. I am liking the Hellcat, though. Definitely liking the experience. Michael Smith says, so I have a 64 Dodge Dart. Awesome car, by the way. I'm jealous already. I like where this is going. The engine needs to be replaced. What engine should I throw in it? I'd like to keep it Mopar. Well, yeah, you're going to... actually, I didn't... Okay, yeah, so... I didn't know not keeping it Mopar would have been an option. Depends on what your budget is, brother. I mean, if you've got a car with a V8 in it now, The 64s do real well with anything. If the budget would allow you to put the 392 in that car, that would be a sweet package. Considering the weight of that car, back that 392 with a 727, throw a gear vendors right behind that, and go with the standalone engines setup and engine ECU, and you'll have yourself a pretty sweet package. If that's not in the mix, I don't know. I would say 360 set of heads, cam, RPM 2 intake manifold. That'll probably put you right where you need to be, and it would be fun as hell to drive. It just depends on what you want to do with the car too. If you're gonna do a pro mod setup, a stock rebuild, what the final goal is for the car is going to really dictate what powers it. So, but it's going to have to be Mopar, no doubt about that. Crazy Josh 6 asks, is there a huge difference between the 5-speed auto and the 8-speed auto? Yes, there are a ton of differences, and that 8-speed auto is considered to be superior to the 5-speed auto. Let's see. Brent Ashby asks, how much weight will one lose using a 6.4 aluminum block replacing with a 6.4 aluminum block replacing a factory 392? A little bit over 100 pounds, say about 105 to 110 pounds, I would guess, thereabouts. Just enough to make it worth doing, in my opinion. I don't see why the 392 doesn't have an aluminum block, since it is performance-oriented engine for the most part. I mean, you can get them. I keep sliding my ass down in this chair. You can get that 392 or the 6.4 liter in the truck. It might just be a cost-saving things, but yeah, about 100 pounds, give or take. Glued Barstool asks, would I consider the 1320? Yeah, actually, the 1320 was on the short list of cars that I was looking at. What I like about the 1320 is unfortunately overshadowed by the fact that you could option a normal scat pack and get albeit the same performance out of that car. And the problem that I have with the 1320 isn't with what the car has, as much as it seems to not have some things that it should, namely a rear gear option. I can't believe that a 331 rear gear set couldn't have been developed for that car. It's billed as the naturally aspirated Demon, and it's marketed as such, even going so far as to have the front seat and the rear seats as optional. However, it doesn't have anything else really going for it that would sell me on the idea of the 1320, aside from it's a pretty special car in that it's set up for drag racing, and you get obviously the line lock, which all the cars I think are coming with now, and you get the ability to more or less have a two-step setup on it. So I don't know. I love the car. I love the idea of the car. I just would have liked to see a little bit more development go into it. And the issue that I have, and this is like a personal thing. To me, it almost feels like that car needed to have about another year of development before it was released. I wish they'd have done that. And if that would have been the case, God, that car could have, coulda, woulda, shoulda, but they could have definitely done more with it. But yeah, as far as what I consider it, absolutely I would. Scout 426, what's up? How's it going? Let's see. Cleaver Enterprise asks, do I recommend 315s on the rear of a 2018 Scat Pack Charger? He says that he's seen rub issues on YouTube, but they're minimal. 275 is not enough. 275 is not enough. Probably would have to say that if you're going to run a rear tire on the Charger, make sure you have the right offset to run that 315. Most guys will opt for the 305s, and the 305s fit fine and hook very well. So the Sloan chiming in, 64 Dart has a tiny engine compartment, 392 probably won't fit. I don't know, man. There were some guys putting big blocks in those things back in the day, but the exhaust manifolds did go into the fender well, so I'll have to admit it's not the biggest. Let's see. Tobirama asks, if he goes with a 5.9 Magnum, which exhaust should he take between Cherry Bomb, Flowmaster, and Borla? Go with the Borla. Believe me, spend the extra money, get the quality stuff. Cry once, not twice. German N says that he can afford the V8. Would having 18-inch wheels on a V8 be better for the engine transmission or the 22s? Does it matter? And it really doesn't matter. Technically speaking, the 18s are better because they're lighter. They put less stress on the transmission, the axles, drive shaft, everything else. But at that power level, you're not going to be putting any real strain on them. So the short answer is, yeah, it does put a little bit more strain on the drivetrain, but you probably won't notice a difference. Let's see. Phoenix 98 asks, Mason, do you spec LS camshafts? Got a mild 383 street strip setup. Actually, I could, but Texas Speed just does a hell of a lot better than I would do with the LSs. I have spec'd several LS camshafts, and oddly enough, the cams that I come up with are very similar to the Texas Speed camshafts, and believe me when I tell you, they work fantastic. So if I were, put it like this, if I were putting a cam together or an LS setup for my own car, I would go through Texas Speed, let them know what I'm working on, and you know, I'm not too proud to say that they do a better job at speccing a cam for an LS than I would. So give them a shout. Ben Martin, cam for daily driven 6.1. It depends on what you want to do with the cam shaft. In other words, do you want a camshaft that's going to make a lot of ruckus, be rowdy at idle? Do you want a cam that's going to be, you know, what do you want the cam to do? I mean, a daily driver, that can mean a lot of different things too. I say go with something mild. You know, either a Comp 270 is a good one. There's, you know, one of our custom grinds at Pipes Performance. You can always get you there too. Just depends on how much money you want to spend, what you're looking for out of the platform, and realistically how much money you want to spend. Because either way, you're going to be needing, well, you're going to need lifters, push rods, and springs to go along with that setup. So keep that in mind when you're looking to put a cam together. Because you got to pay Mopar tax, brother, and it ain't cheap. 2016 Scat Pack, stock wheels. Can you put a 305 on them? Technically, you could. You wouldn't want to, though. And the reason why you wouldn't want to is because if your rim is this wide on that 9-inch, the 305 sticks out like that. I mean, it looks a little ridiculous. But the problem there is that it's not the fact that it's that much wider. It's that the sidewall is very narrow, so you don't have a direct line of sight from load to the ground, and it makes for kind of a crappy contact patch on the road. You can't ever find a good tire pressure to run them at. If you underinflate them, they're going to be cupped, and you're going to get the problem like when I was pattern testing the tires for the Hellcat, where you got the two marks going down the side as opposed to one middle one. Or one full one, and if you overinflate them, you get a smaller one, and they can be a little bit going around corners too. So, nah, I wouldn't do it. Widest I would put on those rims is 275. Let's see. Symphonic says, speaking of Texas Speed, I went to a local shop, and they tried talking me out of the Texas Speed header and get the American Racing or Cooks. They just try to sell me some more expensive shit. No, they didn't. Now, we talk about Texas Speed for their camshafts, but go with Cooks every time for your headers. Every time. American Racing's really good too, don't get me wrong, but Cooks is the good stuff. Go with that. You'll thank me later, by the way. When it comes to headers, Stainless Works makes a good header. Cooks makes a good header. American Racing makes a pretty good header too. Cool thing about American Racing is that they make some headers for some obscure combinations. Well, I say obscure, like Mercedes-Benz, but I'm not even going to say anymore. Get the Cook's headers, please. Do yourself a favor. Clever Enterprise. Thanks for the info. Live ain't so bad. I know. Live is fun, man. I like doing live shows. Let's see. Chief OGK, what do you think about the 04 to 07 CTSV? I feel like it's one of the best value on the market right now. It is. They're reliable. And don't let anybody tell you that they're getting long in the tooth. They're really not. That platform is a solid platform. It's a lot of fun, and you can do a lot of mods with that car, and you can do a lot of different things with that car. They excel on road course. They do well in drag racing. They do well just as a cruiser too. So yeah, that's a fun platform. Anthony Stradwick says, speaking of Hellcat, still haven't seen it. I know, man. So I haven't had the opportunity to actually showcase that car yet, and it's coming. Just with the way things have gone, I really haven't had a chance to. I have shown it sitting in the garage before on the last video, but right now she is dirty girl. She's not really camera ready right now, but hopefully next weekend I'll be able to get you guys some video with it. I did do a 0 to 60. If you haven't seen it yet on the channel, I took the car out when I was pattern testing the tires. I was doing some 0 to 60s and just having fun with the car, and it was basically some 0 to 60 fails with that thing. So if you haven't seen that one, check it out. And I apologize for being so giddy in the video. I was just having a lot of fun with it. So anyway, there's that. So serve, bruh. Yeah, part of the Illuminati. Nah. Tony, what's up? Let's see. Tobirama, what size with rear tires should he use on his truck for 5.9? 455, 535, or if use the Hellfit. Man, use whatever will fit back there if you're gonna be running that kind of power. I gotta say that, typically anything above a 305 is overkill unless you're just going for a specific look. So if you can get a 305 underneath that thing, I would go with that. Symphonic says, interesting. I thought you defended the Texas Speed product. However, the type ship would have cost me around $800. Just the Cook's headers alone are $1,800. Yeah, man, look, I'm not saying that the Texas Speed stuff is bad. I'm just really speaking more from experience with fitment than anything else. So, take that with a grain of salt. The main thing to remember is if it fits your platform and you don't run into any fitment issues, then you're good. If you start to install it and you do find yourself running into issues with fitment, I would stop and get a hold of the manufacturer and find out if there's any recourse that you can take, because the last thing you want to do is to start trying to hammer on a brand new set of headers. So, been there and done that. Tony. Hey, if you're going to be there on Friday, I'll try to make it, man. I'd love to get out there and see what I can get out of this car. And plus, I need to do a little showcasing with it and get her up there, man. I mean, it's the new girl. She got put on the main stage. So, but at any rate, let's see. We're into this for about an hour. Probably going to jump off of here pretty soon. Thank y'all for hanging out with me on Late Night with B. Mason. I know this is a little bit late, so I'm going to call it at this point. But we will catch you guys hopefully next week on the next live show. In the meantime, I'll be trying to put a couple of new videos together for you guys. Aside from that, I think we're going to call it. Oh, wait, hang on. We got some more. Let's see. Anthony Stradwick asks, should I put a tuner on a 2016 Scat Pack as a daily driver? Absolutely, you should. Tobirama Demon versus Shelby 1000. Who would win? Demon would. I mean, Demon's made for drag racing. But since you didn't mention the venue, if it were me, I would call it on a closed course and see if I could make that Shelby 1000 get around the track quicker. But the reality is the Demon's just made for drag racing. It's designed for that from the ground up and from the rear forward. So, yeah, I'd probably say Demon will take that handily. So, but at any rate, well, listen, guys, y'all have a great one. That is a wrap on this. Adios.